Hello and welcome. Welcome to the third lecture of week 4. Today we are going to understand the adaptation and mitigation options available as far as the terrestrial and freshwater ecosystem is concerned. We already have understood and discussed and know now that what are the different observed influences of climate change over terrestrial and water systems. We also have seen that what are the possible risks that may appear in this warming world with respect to different levels of warming. We also have tried to understand what are the different feedback mechanisms and loops with respect to one activity, and that triggers another, and that again goes into a loop and also influence in terms of the temperature rise or cooling. And let us discuss in this third lecture of week 4, that is the 18th lecture. We will discuss what are the adaptation and mitigation options. Particularly, we will emphasize on the adaptation options we have. We will talk about the we will take the same example of biodiversity and try to discuss in detail what are the variety of adaptation options we have, so as to cope up with the risk that is emerging out of climate change. So, to cover this, let us take help of few slides and try to see that what are the concepts we are covering through this lecture. The concepts we are covering are characterization of the natural systems. So, the natural systems that affect vulnerability and help identify solutions. So, what I mean to say, when we understand the natural system well, we understand the vulnerability of that system well, that will help us in term identifying the solution. So, more importantly, if you understand the natural system well, if you understand the problems there, then you can also identify the possible solutions for any kind of risks that particular system is facing or having. So, then proposed adaptation measures to biodiversity. Let us discuss in detail what are the options we have in terms of taking the measures for adapting to biodiversity conservation. So, lot of biodiversity we need to protect. So, what are the options we have? So, proposed adaptation measures for biodiversity conservation we will discuss. Then the third one is a kind of decision making framework to maximize or co-maximize the adaptation and mitigation benefits from natural systems. So, the point here is the solution lies there, the solution lies near the problem. If the problem is there, then solution is also there. So, we need to understand this and co-maximize the adaptation and mitigation benefits from the natural systems. And second, what are the possible actions that needs our assistance, our aid, so assist, and also protect the system in terms of natural system that contains, accommodates biodiversity, conserve the natural system, so that we can prevent any loss in terms of the natural systems. So, then we will discuss about the health of an ecosystem or ecosystem health that influences the prospect of climate resilient development. So, let us take help of few slides and try to understand this, the adaptation options. So, friends, the take home message from this slide goes that the solution lies there. The natural systems we need to understand to identify the solution to the vulnerability and the solutions thereof. So, let us see in terms of a landscape, habitat and species and population as we go across scale. So, at a very high resolution the scale we talk about the species and population, at a medium we talk about the habitat, and then we go up to a landscape level. So, in terms of the landscape, you see small habitat, high level of fragmentation and a kind of inhospitable matrix. In terms of habitats, high disturbance levels, low diversity, whereas at a high resolution as we go with species and population, we understand in terms of the population at range limit, low genetic diversity, competitive ability, poor dispersal ability, narrow thermal tolerance, long generation times. These are some of the what you say characteristics of species and populations. Now, let us see the pre-event, the event and this. So, what is the difference between the pre-event and the event? The events, let us say fire, the precipitation, gain or loss, high temperature and a kind of desertification kind of scenario. So, the pre-event reserve and protect to maintain diversity and extent of natural system. So, in this we need to increase the connectivity to improve the recolonization. If these kind of things happen, then we need to do this. But for solutions to build resilience and aid recovery in terms of the post event, we need to monitor to assess recovery and identify managements that are required. Similarly, as far as habitat is concerned, minimize disturbance and other stressors, for example, water extraction from rivers, pollution of waterways and oceans and all these things. Similarly, with respect to species and population, minimize the population stressors and things like that. And on the right hand side, if you see with respect to temperature rise and the deforestation or desertification or a drought kind of scenario, we can see the we need to assess the cost and the livelihood of intervention success, and also need to understand and to see the feasibility accessibility in terms of ongoing management objectives as far as the management policy is concerned. Now, let us go to the specific case. In terms of the specific case as far as the proposed adaptation measures for biodiversity is concerned. So, we have picked this table directly from the report and let us try to analyze one by one. The first one is proposed adaptation measures for biodiversity. The first point is protect the large areas of natural and semi-natural habitat. So, as far as the Aichi target is concerned, any country, any nation needs to conserve at least 1/3 of its terrestrial land area under protection, or declare 1/3 of its minimum 1/3 of its land area under protection and protection for biodiversity. So, we have different kind of protection, means protecting an area or a species or particular to any program. So, wildlife sanctuary, you have national parks, we have biosphere reserves and things like that. So, uncertainty, in terms of uncertainty involved in this protecting large area of natural and semi-natural habitat, are the uncertainties are robust evidence, but there is very high agreement. So, it is very high agreement and evidence is very clear. So, if we it is simply if we go on creating or bringing more area under protection, that means the interference with the interference from the human being side is totally stopped or minimized to the best possible extent. So, more area under protection will conserve more species. So, the comment is there is a considerable evidence that intact systems provide better quality and quantity of ecosystem services. Yes, we agree. This is because if it is intact system, then the quality and quantity of ecosystem services delivery is better. So, then larger intact areas provide better ecosystem services. The risk of species extinction from disturbances including climate change is reduced by having large connected population. So, if you have a large and a connected population, then the risk of species extinction will be relatively reduced. Then more biodiverse system provide higher levels of ecosystem services and are more resilient to climate change than the degraded systems that have lost the species. So, let us move to the next one is increase connectivity in terrestrial habitats. So, here you have lesser or medium level evidence and medium level agreement also. The point is, if we increase the connectivity in terrestrial habitats, or we say the corridor connectivity, okay, or connectivity between two protected system, one wildlife sanctuary, one national park, we construct a corridor, we develop a corridor, or we remain or we leave a corridor so that it gives a connectivity. So, there is agreement and disagreement. There is agreement and disagreement, but more so if there is connectivity between two protected system, there is a good evidence that some species move more quickly in more connected landscapes. However, not all species do, and some of those that benefit are invasive pest or disease species. So, to date empirical evidence showing that connectivity has reduced climate change impacts on species is limited. So, the other side is in terms of the connectivity or the corridor. If you have a corridor, then the unwanted species, we say the pest, the invasive species are also moving faster or taking advantage of that corridor or that connectivity route. So, there is a medium level of agreement also for this. That means, increased connectivity in terms of contributing to biodiversity conservation between two protected area systems have medium level of evidence and thus medium level of agreement. Let us move on to the third one, that is increased connectivity in river networks. So, limited evidence, but high agreement. So, if you have a connectivity between the river networks, then what will happen? The connectivity is needed to maintain the movement of species and population. This species movement is between the aquatic systems. So, but the river reaches the catchment lack integrated protection. But the point is, all the rivers then finally they end up at the estuary and meet the sea and the ocean. So, that is why the evidence of this is limited, but apart from that the agreement is very high as far as the increased habitat patch size and expand protected area and the increased connectivity in terms of the river networks. The next one is if we increase the patch size, that means the contiguity of a patch, the forest patch or any patch which is under a protected system, then or expand the protected area, it will definitely accommodate more or provide or enable to provide more resilience because of the function of natural processes. Large species populations and refusal area is helpful for biodiversity conservation. Similarly, increased replication of the representation of the protected areas, it has high agreement, but evidence is limited because various benefits inferred including a wider range of climate and other conditions and less risk of extreme events affecting many rather than few areas. So, let us move on to the next one is the protect microclimate refugia. Yes, that means microclimate means you understand, you take the example of a mountain system, and at a mountain system you have different slope, different aspect, different elevation level, and that gives you enables you a various microclimate. Microclimate means a set of climate is influenced in one patch or a lesser area. So, so a set of microclimate, so different refugia. So, different set of microclimate accommodates different set of biodiversity or different endemic species, which so we call them the endemic species because they are local to that area, they are focused to or restricted to that area. So, different microclimates helps in providing refugia to different species or various endemic species. So, we call locally cool areas can be identified, and there is evidence that species can survive better in such ways. So, it can be identified, or it can be promoted or tried to be created also. So, the next or the last line here is creating shade to lower temperatures for vulnerable species. So, what happens in many places, we this is also one of the conservation tips, you create lot of shade areas, so that it will give multiple benefits what a tree or forest offers, including giving a cooling area, keeping the groundwater column little high, and giving foders, everything. So, this also gives a value or what you say, improves in terms of species survival under the warming conditions. Okay, but this needs to be demonstrated, well established, and practiced in due course. Similarly, we have other few. One is the restoration of natural vegetation dynamics, then reduction in terms of non-climatic stressors to increase the resilience of ecosystems, assisted translocation and migration of species, invasive management for specific species, ex situ conservation in terms of seed bank, you say the genetic stores and all this, adjusting conservation strategies and site objectives to reflect changing species distributions and habitat characteristics. And also towards the end, we have softening the matrix of unsuitable habitats between patches to increase this on a between the patches to increase permeability for the improvement of species in response to climate. This has limited evidence, but there is potential for agro environment. So, agri environment schemes to do this hostile framed landscapes. So, some agroforestry, joint forest management, they also do follow under this purview of protecting the species or conserving the biodiversity. There is very less evidence, but in the future scenarios when we are entering into more of a what you say agroforestry kind of system, there this kind of setup is required, and it will promote the biodiversity conservation. Now, let us move on in terms of the possible actions to assist, protect and conserve natural ecosystems and prevent the loss. So, friends, here we see no conservation. On the y axis we see the wildlife population size. The first is no conservation, lot of endangered species go extinct, and severe losses, decline in the species. Then limited protected areas, what happens? Conservation of endangered species in protected areas, but species outside of the conservation area are unprotected. The third one or the middle one is the assisted adaptation. So, that means high management of most at risk species to reduce non-climatic stressors. So, if we do assisted management, then this will happen in terms of the species to reduce the high management of most at this. So, species banking in zoos, captive breeding programs and seed banking, all these things fall under this in terms of the assisted adaptation. Now, the next one is assisted migration. One adaptation, as all of us know, we adjust, we adapt. Then migration, if we cannot adjust, if we cannot adapt to that situation there, changing climate scenario, then we need to move out where there is a suitability in terms of the new climate change scenario. So, active assistance in relocating the species to habitable climate spaces. The last one is you see the color gradation is also a kind of reddish to orange to a kind of yellowish to faint green and then a dark green. So, this itself says that we are in a conservation or the conservation practice is increased. So, if that is increased, then the wildlife population also will be protected. So, extended protected areas and connectivity, at least 30 to 50% of the earth can be protected with this. What is that? Larger protected areas that are well connected to another host higher biodiversity and allow natural movements as climate change reduces the habitat quality. So, that means high biodiversity is more climate resilient and provides better climate migration and climate regulation. So, friends, the take home message is the larger areas, connected areas, or we say contiguous area, larger connected contiguous areas protect more or accommodate more diversity, protect diversity, gives resilience, and also provides better climate mitigation, because they work in a complementarity principle. So, that is that we discussed in terms of the possible actions to assist, protect and conserve natural ecosystems and to prevent the biodiversity loss. Now, in terms of decision making, the decision making frameworks to co-maximize the adaptation and mitigation, abbreviated as ADAM, benefits from the natural ecosystems. Now, similarly, you see from in this linked diagram having lot of connectivities in terms of arrows in different colors, the colors move or vary from red to green, means indicative of red as we know, low biodiversity, low ecosystem kind of functioning to and simple structure, whereas when we are moving to a green kind of thing, it is high biodiversity, high ecosystem functioning and complex structure and processes. Now, on the left hand side you have degraded system. It is a very, it accommodates low biodiversity, low kind of ecosystem functioning and very simple structure. Okay. And then when we move to healthy and what you say healthy and undisturbed, then everything goes in terms of means increases in terms of conservation prospect, in terms of resilient prospect, in terms of the protection prospect. So, degraded to healthy and undisturbed in terms of green actually moves in that direction and leads to a kind of higher level of carbon capture and storage. In terms of maturity level, the system which is having healthy and undisturbed in terms of protection have all these things good in terms of carbon storage, in terms of water storage conservation, in terms of the utilization of the available solar radiation in our albedo or photosynthetically active radiation. So, all these things. So, that means a healthy undisturbed and a contiguous or a larger system is more important in term or give maximum co-benefits or maximum benefits to the ecosystem, and it is a stable system, or we say the ecosystem which is larger, undisturbed and healthy is a stable, resilient and a protected system, and it will also give lot of resilience as far as the changing climate is concerned. So, a graphics in terms of the ecosystem health, the ecosystem health influences prospects for climate resilient development. On the left hand side you can see written in red color and on the right hand side written in blue color. So, red means we are having a degraded system. Human activities that degrade ecosystem also drive global warming and negatively impact the nature and the peace. On the right hand side, human activities that protect, conserve and restore ecosystems contribute to climate resilient development. So, it is very clear that a system which is having human interference is relatively less stable. It is relatively less stable in terms of the climate change perspective as well. So, we need to adapt to a situation. Here in this class or in this lecture we discussed we are trying to understand different mechanisms in terms of adaptation. So, adaptation mechanism as far as the biodiversity is concerned we discussed in detail, and that is a natural system, and a natural system, healthy system, contiguous system is more stable. Now, look at the three functional attributes. If you remember the very second or third slides we discussed about the plant functional types. So, similarly we mentioned that a natural system, the stability in a natural system comes from from its functioning, its complex functioning, linking and interlinking within the system, intra and interaction within a system. So, that is actually more and more important, and every system has a capability to adapt to certain amount of risks. So, we need to always act within the threshold of within the threshold of adaptation, threshold of risk, otherwise the species will meet extinction. And coming to the adaptation, we have various ways of adapting. We will also discuss in as we address, as we move, we will see that we have different adaptation methods. The best, the cheapest is the one which is nature based. So, here if we understand the system, we understand the problem, we understand the vulnerability, and then we adapt or we come out with a solution that are suitable to nature. So, we put them under nature based solutions in terms of adaptation. The second thing is the technological adaptations or various managerial shift. You see, in terms of biodiversity conservation or biodiversity adaptation to biodiversity loss kind of situation, we thoroughly discussed about all the various ways where and how we can protect. So, so incorporation of various policy and management principles and practices also helps in a better adaptation. And the technological, we also take help of the technology. So, in terms of storing this to overcome the chance of extinction, we have started creating the gene banks, we have started creating the seed banks. So, if it is there, then we will also try to modify and we also have discussed with respect to the translocation, assisted translocation. So, all these are technological or biotechnological interventions. And moreover, we also discuss about species distribution model. The species distribution model actually gives us or indicates us about the situation that is going to or likely to happen in future. In future, we foresee at present. So, that means if you can foresee a situation in terms of the species migration, the species loss, the extinction of the species, or the species spread in terms of the invasive species, then we can take appropriate measure in terms of adapting to this kind of new situations. So, this is what is very indicative, and with respect to the terrestrial and water ecosystems, we have discussed by taking the example of biodiversity, which is very common, that what are the options we have in terms of adapting to this changing climate situation. So, the same chapter in terms of terrestrial and freshwater ecosystems and their services, which appeared in the Climate Change 2022 have been taken. All these figures have been taken as references to discuss or to formulate this lecture. Now, coming to the characteristics. The characteristics in terms of these are the conclusions we discuss. We discuss about the natural systems that affect vulnerability and gives us the solutions. We also try to understand different adaptation measures that can be proposed to arrest biodiversity loss. We also try to understand the decision making framework, so that a kind of adaptation and mitigation plan can be derived and can be put in place for and to be followed, so that a natural system benefits can be derived. And then the ecosystem health influences the prospects as far as the climate resilient development is concerned. So, possible actions to assist, protect and conserve natural ecosystems will prevent any loss or damage to that system. In turn, will make the system more viable, more inclusive, more means having a interlinked and a complementarity in terms of the functions, thereby making it a resilient system. So, that is what we discussed in terms of adaptation as far as the terrestrial system is concerned. Thank you very much for attending.